Good morning, MBA members and guests. This is John Pope. I'm the MBA president of the board, and I just want to welcome everybody to our third weekly Member Connect event. With the recent new health order that's going to go into effect Monday morning, we've worked with the County of Marin to put together a Member Connect event, and we thank everybody for attending. This is really a privilege and opportunity we have in the construction industry, Marin, to set an example and lead, kind of being the first industry to open under the new health order. So I'm going to let Rick Wells take it from here, and it's going to talk about what we're doing today. But just a huge thank you to both our staff members and all of the stakeholders from throughout Marin County and getting us to this point.
Thanks, John. If we have not had the chance to meet in person, my name is Rick Wells. I serve as the CEO of the Marin Builders Association. And I'd like to start by saying we are all encouraged to be here together with you today. We have over 135 attendees registered for this member event. And today's program is going to be fast-paced, 30 minutes, so you can get back to your day and prepare yourself and your team for getting back to work. We want you to know that we are here to help you in any way we can as we all navigate this situation together. We have either already posted or will send you all the key points and resources from today's briefing. Also, a recording of today's webinar will be posted to our site. Congratulations on going back to work. As many of you know, like so many of us over the past month and a half, our team at the Builders Association is adjusting our business, and we're doing so to help guide your firm through this. And we're only able to do that because of you and your ongoing membership support. So a quick but important thank you to our board of directors, many of whom are on this call today, our cornerstone partners, and our 570 plus member firms that support our work today. Your support is empowering us to focus our work to help guide your construction firm through these challenging times of change. So one of the resources I'd like to bring your attention to is our COVID-19 resources page at marinbuilders.com. Originally, this page went up on March 17th, just after we received our first shelter-in-place order. It's been updated just about every day since then and is now the most visited page on our website. It contains a wealth of information and resources dedicated solely to running a construction firm here in Marin County. We'll send you a page link as part of the follow-up, and it not only has today's information, but it has posters, templates, worker self-certifications, and much more, most in English and Spanish. If you have suggestions as you scroll through the site and you think there's something that might be helpful for your fellow members, please feel free to send directly to me, and we'll do our best to get it posted as quickly as possible. So before we hand it over to our featured presenter, Brian Crawford from the County Marin, I'd like to welcome our first special surprise guest today. Christine Pachini is the Marin Builders Association Dynamic Director of Membership and Business Development. She's going to share a few quick words about two current programs, two ways you can support the Builders Association efforts right now. So Christine.
Thank you, Rick. It's an honor to be here today, and I want to start by taking a quick minute to recognize our board president, John Pope, and our CEO, Rick Wells, for the amazing job that they are doing to keep us all connected and informed during these challenging times. I'm excited to tell you about our fabulous member referral program because it's a wonderful way you can help us build our community and show your support right now. We're sharing so much good information, providing so many valuable resources, hosting interesting virtual events like this one. If you know anyone building or in the building community in Marin that might also benefit by being engaged with us, I'd be honored to reach out to them to share some information. All I need is a little contact information from you, and I'll do the rest. It's easy. You can submit a simple fillable form online at marinbuilders.com. It's under the Join Us tab. Rick is showing that to you right now. There's also a downloadable form available there if you would prefer to work in a hard copy, which you can then just email to me, Christine@marinbuilders.com. If the referred business joins Marin Builders Association, We will waive their application fee of $100 as a courtesy to them, and we will offer you, the referring member, a $100 bonus in appreciation. And as an additional thank you, referring members are also highlighted on our website and in our newsletters. So it's a win-win for everyone. We are on deadline right now for our next Marin Home Resource Guide, but anyone who joins right away would be able to be listed in our Directory of Professionals, which is an included member benefit. This popular guide is the go-to for all things building in Marin, and the June release of the next issue is sure to be timely. And I also want to be sure to mention that for those of you who may be still considering advertising in the next guide, today, May 1st, is the absolute deadline to reserve ad space. You do not need to be a member to advertise. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. Links to this information will also be shared in the follow-up email that we're sending out later today. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Christine. And we'll move right into the main part of our program. And that is Brian Crawford, the Director of the Community Development Agency for Marin County. Previously, he held the position of Assistant Director from 06 to 08 when he was appointed Director by the Board of Supervisors in 08. Originally joined the CDA in 1988. He's a product of the hardscrabble streets of Mill Valley and graduated from UC Berkeley in 1983 with a degree in Conservation Resource Studies. All yours, Brian.
Thank you, Rick, and hopefully you can hear me okay. Let me know if you can't. First of all, I want to thank Rick and John and Christine for inviting me to the webinar this morning. There's been a lot going on, as you know, in the last couple of weeks. It's really been a wild ride in terms of how to respond in real time to major changes in our regulatory process that have been triggered by the health order. And so I can't think of a better time for us to be connected and communicating with the Marin Builders Association and their members. So I'm grateful for the opportunity. This morning, I don't have a whole lot of time. As Rick mentioned, we're going to be moving quickly. I'm going to start by giving you a very brief overview of the progression of the health orders that have been issued by the county and the state to date. I'm going to spend a little more time highlighting some of the more specific key provisions in the health order that was issued on the 29th. And then I'll close by pointing up some of the things that I see on the horizon, both in terms of how future changes to the health order will be considered, at least the context that I see it from where I sit, as well as some near-term changes that we're going to be putting into place as early as next week when the order becomes effective. I also want to point out and qualify my remarks that I'm speaking from the county's perspective and not necessarily cities and towns. And I say that because the health orders, although they've been adopted by the county official, the county's public health officer, they do apply equally to all the cities and towns. And each city and town has the responsibility and the charge of interpreting them and implementing them. We've been trying to maintain as much consistency as possible across jurisdictional lines, but nonetheless, ultimately, the judgment calls that need to be made are done so by the individual building officials and community development directors. I think that issue is going to get a lot better, a lot more consistent as we get into the new health order. So I'm going to, Rick's suggestion, I'm going to bring up a couple of slides here that will hopefully allow you to follow along, and just bear with me here while I bring those up. All right, does that look good?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. So the first public health order was issued on March 16th, and that followed declarations of emergency by the state, the governor, as well as here locally in Marin. And it included both restrictions and exemptions. There was an exemption for quote unquote construction of housing that was actually embedded in a definition for essential infrastructure that included a lot of other things. There was some head scratching, frankly, going on amongst local building and community development officials about what construction of housing really meant. In other words, does it mean all residential development, or does it mean just new single family homes and new ADUs? So there was a lot of back and forth going on about how to interpret that and apply it particularly in the context of individual projects. There was also an exemption for plumbing and electricity that are necessary to maintain safety, sanitation, essential operations of residential buildings. All of these terms are not crystal clear. On March 19th, the governor issued an executive order that identified construction as essential workforce, and that came under its own state exemption. That was much broader than Marin's March 16th exemption for construction of housing. I'll come back to that in a moment. So at that point, Marin's order was more restrictive than the state, and the reason that is because local public health officials have extraordinary powers when they declare a local state of emergency to adopt their own local rules. They can be more restrictive than the state, but they can't be less restrictive. So, the debates and questioning about what construction of housing meant under March 16th didn't last long, because on March 31st, we saw the next public health order, and that included a new and a separate list of exemptions for construction activities. It included essential infrastructure, absent the housing or construction of housing. It included affordable housing, and then improvements or work that involved safety, sanitation, and habitability to both commercial and residential buildings that cannot be reasonably delayed. And as you might imagine, that was particularly challenging to implement in the face of the county suspending 1,700 active building permits. We were receiving a steady stream of calls, some of which may have come from some of you all out there, wondering whether their project fell into these criteria, and if not, why so. So that again put us in a really challenging work environment, particularly for our staff who were charged with interpreting and applying these, but also they have a lot of empathy for property owners and contractors in Marin. So that was a really tough job. So the new public health order came out earlier this week, and it basically, I think from what I see, shifts the major lens for creating exemptions from trying to distinguish between essential and non-essential buildings to allowing what I see as virtually all construction projects, both those that are permitted and permits that are going to be issued in the future, as well as landscaping projects, from the shelter at home order. But there's a big if here, and it's the job site safety protocols that I suspect most, if not all of you, are somewhat familiar with at this point. And so the county's new health order really goes back to and ties in the governor's health order, state shelter at home order, I should say, in March, by relying upon a definition of essential workforce that was issued by the state public health department. And that includes, I've got the quote here, construction workers who support the construction, operation, inspection, and maintenance of construction sites and construction projects, including housing, commercial, mixed use. There's also a provision in our local health order that identifies institutional educational projects. So you can see pendulum has swung way back in the other direction now. As I mentioned, the success of the new public health order regarding construction activities and continuing to stem the spread of the virus relies heavily on these projects, construction project safety protocols, and they're found in Appendix B of the local health order. And they differentiate between large projects and small projects. Small projects being defined as 10 units or less, or commercial projects that have 20,000 square feet or less. And then Appendix B2 includes a separate, but to a certain extent, similar or same set of restrictions as the Appendix B small construction projects. So here's an example of some of the key provisions in the job site protocols, safety protocols for small projects. Complying with OSHA and Cal Osha requirements. Designating a job site supervisor for compliance means that somebody's got to be on the site all the time to make sure that all of the job site protocols are being implemented, and that there's somebody responsible at the site to make sure that if they don't see complete compliance, they're making adjustments, and that they're available to speak with a building inspector when they show up, and particularly if they question whether or not the job site protocols are being properly implemented. There's also a lot of stuff about cleaning and sanitizing, social distancing. Another really interesting one for small project is no carpooling. And there's a couple of outs on this one. One is unless the workers are sharing a household. And then the second out for the carpooling job site protocol is if the worker has no other means of getting to the job site. That one's going to be really difficult for any public official to try to monitor. So important that you work with your staff to make sure that they're doing their best to try to adhere to that. Another key provision is to seal off separate work areas for inside construction, either by plastic sheeting or if you close the door and then tape it shut. And then also, something I'm sure that commonly takes place in job sites is on breaks and lunch hours, workers getting together. That's not allowed under the job site safety protocols as well. And then also staggering the trades as necessary to try to minimize the number of workers that are on site at any given time. Now, the large project safety protocols, as I mentioned, have some similarities to the small site protocols. Here is a couple of two or three examples of some differences. One is that under large projects, there's a requirement for the preparation of a site-specific health and safety plan that needs to be translated into Spanish, presumably. I think it makes reference to translation. Spanish is a good place to start. And that job-specific health and safety plan has to have a lot of things in it to demonstrate compliance. There also needs to be a safety compliance officer on the site, and that's somewhat similar to the small project job site safety protocol for having a designated contractor to oversee compliance. There are some additional requirements for the safety compliance officer for large projects, such as holding daily briefings with staff to make sure they understand what to do and to comply and how to do that. And then perhaps one of the biggest distinctions in the large project safety protocols is the requirement for a third-party job site safety accountability supervisor. It needs to be OSHA certified. So I know that's a very broad brush overview of the new order. If you haven't seen it already, it's available on the county's public health site. And again, I encourage you to read it really carefully, including the job site safety protocols. So where we're heading in the future is that the public health officials in the county, as well as I think this holds true for the other Bay Area counties who have been collaborating on the public health safety order, is to re-examine our local order in 2 to 3 week timeframes, keeping in mind key indicators that will be reviewed and examined closely to track progress. So some of the indicators include number of new cases, what the testing capacity is in the county. County wants to move from testing 300 people a day to 500 people a day. One of the limitations there is getting a hold of the equipment, the swabs, the no swabs in the vials. Contact investigation is another key indicator, meaning when people do contract the disease, that public health officials can ensure that they're adequately quarantined and that they're following up with everyone that person came into contact with to make sure that they're quarantined. Number of hospital admissions is a really particularly sensitive health indicator. Obviously, that's an indication of people who are adversely affected by the virus. And then surge capacity. And so, the current order, I think, has an expiration date at the end of May, but I wouldn't rule out any revisions to the order that may come before that May deadline, based upon these more limited reviews that are going to be occurring within 2 to 3 weeks. So in terms of what's next for the county, here at the Civic Center, we're going to begin to issue new permits. We have been accepting permits, as some of you may know, and we've been plan checking them in anticipation of the lifting of the order. But as of next week, we will begin to issue new permits. We're not going to open up our front counter yet, so don't plan on coming to the Civic Center on Monday morning because we don't have our front counter set up right now to ensure that we can maintain adequate social distancing. That will come though. I don't have a time frame for you on that, but that's what we're working on now, one of the key things. In the meantime, you can contact our staff to arrange for a designated pickup time for a permit that's ready to be issued at the front door area. We'll also be mailing permits. We've been doing that already, so we'll continue that service. And then we'll also be reopening our online permitting system. We had to close that down 3 or 4 weeks ago when the initial county public health order came out. But we're going to reopen that up, and that's a good thing because that represents about roughly 60% of the permits that we issue. We're also going to continue inspections. We have been doing inspections for projects, essential projects that were allowed to proceed under the 2 prior county health orders. We'll also be continuing to do digital inspections. We've been doing those now for a couple of years, but we will be going to the site. One of the key things to keep in mind for on-site inspections is that if our inspectors come to a job site during a routine inspection and they see that the job site safety protocols haven't been put into place adequately, then they're going to leave and you're going to need to schedule a reinspection, and it's going to cost additional fees. So again, really important that all of your staff know how to comply, that you've got a lead person on the site who is really well versed and has one of the chief responsibilities of monitoring the site pretty diligently to make sure that everybody's complying. One thing that I can say perhaps on the part of other cities and towns is that I think all the inspectors in the county are going to be given the authority and the discretion by their chief building officials or community development directors to refrain from conducting an inspection if they don't see that it's safe to go into the building. And one of the really more important concerns and issues that local building officials have, myself as other community development directors, in addition to making sure that you can start your work now and catch up, is the safety of our staff, the safety of our building inspectors. So we're going to be particularly sensitive to that. And we're asking for your own diligence and your own heightened sensitivity to making sure that when an inspector shows up, things are in place. All right, so that concludes my remarks. I think I might have finished a little bit early, but that's it for now. Thank you. I'll leave you with just a closing note that I think the success of this next health order is going to be largely dependent upon all of you to make sure that you're conducting your sites in a safe manner. As I mentioned, we have 1,700 active building permits. I think San Rafael and Novato have a similar number. Cities and towns obviously got a lot of permits. There's a lot of pent-up permits for those jurisdictions that have been doing the plan checking but not issuing. There's no way that our building inspectors can visit sites frequently enough to make sure that they're being monitored with the frequency that they should be. So that, again, that responsibility is going to be on you folks. And so we're really looking for your partnership and your collaboration and commitment to making sure that that your work is being done properly under this new order.
Brian, thank you so much. We appreciate your time, your partnership, and your outreach to the building community. It means a lot to know that we've got access to you and that you care about our work going forward. And again, we appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
So we're going to move on to our next special guest. And some of you may know Dan from 2 weeks ago. Dan McLennan from Smith, Curry & Hancock. He's managing partner at the San Francisco office, also the 2019 president of the Marin Builders Association. He only has 30 plus years of experience as counsel to the construction industry, and he is involved in countless other associations and has an experienced and tenured view of the construction industry. So with that, I will turn it over to Dan.
Gosh, thanks, Rick. Nice write-up there. I got to adopt that for myself. So let me share my screen here, and I'm going to bring up some slides for you. See if this will work.
Yep.
Okay, there we go. I'm going to talk, like Brian did, about the updated SIP orders, shelter-in-place orders that came out yesterday. We have an article already published on it on the MBA website for anybody that's interested. It basically recounts a lot of what Brian just said. And what our questions for today is what projects may go forward. And as Brian said, it's all now deemed essential, going back to the governor's original proclamation back in the middle of March. And we've come a long way since then. And now we're back at construction being essential. That's new, in progress, and restarting projects, residential, commercial, public, you name it, it's all essential. So what's the catch? And compliance with stringent detailed protocols is essential. And the appendixes, as Brian was talking about, are listed and linked to the website, the MBA website, so you have it. One thing that needs to be mentioned is that they incorporate the new Cal Osha requirements published on April 24. And you see the slides here. The slides here will be posted to the website, but also you have live links here that'll take you right to the Cal Osha requirements, and they are not the same as Appendix B1 and B2. In fact, there's things in the Cal Osha requirements that are addition to or different from and have different requirements. So what my office is doing is compiling modified B1 and B2 appendixes to incorporate the different Cal Osha requirements that are now applicable. So stay tuned for our modified appendixes. So what if I don't comply? It is a misdemeanor, folks, if you don't comply, which means that you could be fined. And we heard of a fine last week of a $1,000 ticket given to a landscaper that refused to comply. And it hasn't happened yet that I know of, but repeat offenders could certainly be arrested. And this is a big deal. Probably more importantly for this crowd and this audience is that if people don't comply, we blow it for everybody. The risk is that if a site or sites turn up hot, where there's a number of infections that are linked to a particular work site, then the county health officer may conclude that, it's not a good idea. Contractors can't be trusted to do the protocols, and we're just going to have to wait this out and shut down all the projects. So there won't be any, or we could revert back to the essential, certain public works, healthcare, construction, that sort of thing. So if we don't comply as a group, we can blow it for everybody. And so I want to emphasize that. And, to an extent, we need to be policing each other. And the bad apples can ruin it for everybody. And what is that? What are you talking about, Dan? Well, I'm thinking that if we observe projects that are not being prone to the protocol, see something, say something. Talk to the foreman there and say, look, dude, get your stuff together. You're going to wreck it for everybody. And, if you're not comfortable talking to the project, mention, get the address and call it in to Rick at Marin Builders, and Rick can talk to them. And if if you want to follow it up a little further, you could take it to Brian's office and say, Brian, look, they're not complying. Would you have somebody go down there and give them a warning? Again, this is not to narc on somebody, not to make their life difficult, but to make sure that they are not going to become a hotspot that could get on the health officer's radar. Eyes will be on you. And not only are we watching everybody else, neighbors are watching. And neighbors are very concerned about having protocols be followed because they don't want your germs to be coming over on their property and infecting their kids. And so neighbors are going to be watching for failures by contractors to comply. Other contractors are going to be watching, certainly the inspectors are, and the police officers are going to be doing drive-bys and issuing citations if necessary. Maybe, a couple of warnings, but if you don't get your stuff in place, expect to get a fine at least. What do I have to do? Well, obviously, for all the projects, you have to study and learn the protocols. And I want to emphasize not only study and learn, but implement. But do it in a showy way. It's a good thing, certainly, obviously, to comply. But make a show of it. Put out big posters, big, shiny, laminated posters, so everybody can see that as they walk by your job, it says, this job complies with these protocols, And those posters are available for vendors through the Marin Builders Association. Make sure that your guys, as they drive up to the site, they have their mask on. If they're walking from their car to the site, they have their mask on. Make sure that they're not walking shoulder to shoulder, that they're walking 6 feet apart. Every time that they're in the public eye around your project, they need to be on their best behavior. They need to be showing that they are taking this seriously. Put your wash stations available right at the front entrance so people can see people are washing as they come in and as they wash as they go out. Designate a single gate. Make it obvious. Enter here only, so that people can see that there's a point where everybody who comes in and out of the site is going to be evaluated by the responsible person on the site. And then use worker certification forms. And there's a link on the website to that, so that every day the on-site supervisor will gather these certification forms by the workers that say, no, I'm not infected. I haven't been around somebody that's been infected. I don't have any of the symptoms, that kind of stuff. Gather those every day so you can prove that you're doing your job to take care of it. Marin Builders Association has all the forms you need and all the resources to make sure that you comply. And last point is, who's going to pay for all of this? And this obviously isn't the time to talk about all the ramifications there. We're going to put together a webinar next week for this very issue, talking about the contract clauses between the owner and the prime and the subs. But one other thing to be thinking about is the builder's risk insurance policy that most, if not all, of these projects have. They certainly should have builder's risk policies. And there's potential opportunities to get the insurance company to pay for the extra costs related to all the compliance. So just food for thought. I'd love to talk about this stuff if anybody would like to follow up with me separately. All right, Rick, thanks. That's all I have.
All right, fantastic, Dan. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time and your expertise. Last thing for today is just to thank you for joining us. Remember, all of our resources, including those from today, are posted at marinbuilders.com. They're already up there in the left-hand column under today's webinar. We'd like to wish you a healthy and safe weekend, and congratulations on going back to work. Please stay safe, stay healthy out there. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick.